Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of WagmiTV. This is our third episode, and we're really excited to be back this week with you guys. With me, as always, the Doctor, Doc Mata, All-American, Evan Smith, and the NFT Lord himself, Garcia. What's going on, fellas?
Doing good.
Yeah, dude,
Been spending way too much time watching March Madness, probably.
Hey, Big Blue, we're still playing, baby. We're still playing. The boys in blue are still in.
Seriously.
Cheers to that.
Wow.
Cheers to Sweet 16.
Fifth consecutive Sweet 16.
Is that so? Yeah, I did. I
Really?
did actually see something like that, right? It was like we're one of five that has done that.
Yeah, and then we've got the most tournament wins since 2013. So kind of like a quiet dynasty in
Yeah, we were built for
my
March.
opinion.
We're built for March.
That hasn't won anything.
Yeah.
Hey, we almost got
that's the
there.
caveat.
Yeah, that's the caveat.
All right.
It'd be
Well,
the first
yeah,
year an
we've,
11 seed would win if we won.
Yeah,
the championship.
I don't even know.
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think George Mason was the last 11 seed, so
I
figure
forgot
our
about
chances
that.
are a little better.
I would hope so.
I would hope so.
Oh.
All right. Well, to the listeners, thank you very much for joining us for another week. You know, I think the biggest thing that happened from a macro perspective over the last week has been, the Fed meeting last week. Obviously, they decided to raise 25 basis points, which was expected by the market. Not a whole lot of movement, but I think like a little bit of a relief rally because, kind of that main risk is out of the way for the time being. What do you guys think about, kind of the market environment here post Fed meeting? And then going into May, where, if you listen to Powell's comments today, seems quite likely that, we could be seeing 50 basis point rate hike in May. Definitely on the table. What do you guys make of it all?
I mean, yeah, it felt pretty risk on after, but I always think it's interesting, right? I feel like the market always reacts, even though, we were talking about this a little bit. It's like we've already priced these in, all that, but it always reacts, even though it's like exactly what was expected. So it felt a little bit risk on. Today was a little bit different after that. We got what was it again? 7 hikes total, 6 after this is the thought process. With the next one being half, 0.5. So I don't know. I think it's a tough market out there. No one really knows. It's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stuff going on geopolitically in the macro perspective. So it's just tough to really tell. But for a second there, it felt like we were getting a little bullish signal, but who knows?
Yeah, well, the second half of the week took off, right? I think Kathy Wood's portfolio was up 25%, which, I mean, she's loaded with the emerging tech growth, so you'll love to see it.
Innovation, baby.
Those definitely need cheap money. Like that's definitely a sector to keep your eye out on, because I think these hikes are going to really affect that type of market. And then in addition, like the altcoins, like if we just start getting hammered with, a half a point hike and then maybe even more than 7, like those are going to be in danger as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering when, because at some point the market, if there's way too many hikes, will crack, and that'll force the Fed to slow its ropes. And I think that's what a lot of people are banking on. Like, I don't know a whole lot of people that actually believe that there will be 7 rate hikes, even though they're priced in right now. I think a lot of people are thinking that some market move at some point this year will force the Fed to slow down, and that will probably kind of like that sort of big sell-off will get them to kind of like pump the brakes, because 7 rate hikes in 1 year is extremely that's pretty risky in terms of like the potential to possibly slow down the market and also in turn slow down the economy. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think one thing, bringing it back to the crypto, that I found interesting was this chart. So this is basically Bitcoin dominance by market cap, right? And so you can see that like coming up here, this is the huge, when we saw basically the entire crypto market really take off. Like first Bitcoin moved and then everything else moved, right? Last year. So you see this major decline in terms of like basically the rest of the crypto market by market cap was rallying extremely hard. And we've been kind of range bound here. What's interesting is basically since January, we've been on an uptrend in Bitcoin dominance. Not necessarily, I don't think, because Bitcoin has been rallying. Bitcoin has been pretty much range bound, but you're kind of, to Garcia's point, your more high risk plays, your altcoins, things like that have been getting hit a lot harder. And so this, like last week was the first time you actually saw like a little bit of a turnaround in this trend. So this is going to be something I'm watching. Like it's possible maybe, we all saw Ethereum like rip pretty hard last week. Yeah. And, possibly some of these other altcoins could follow that trend. People always talk about like, at some point, Bitcoin is going to get flipped, maybe by Ethereum, maybe by something else in terms of market cap. And it's like, at some point, logic says that should happen just because Bitcoin doesn't have like a whole lot of use case at the moment versus something like Ethereum, which definitely does. So that's something I found interesting last week that stood out to me and something to kind of keep an eye on maybe moving forward. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I really like that. And it's interesting, the allusion here to, I don't know if y'all watch like Ben Cohen ever, but he does this thing every week. It's the look at the bull market support band. And based on how he's set everything up, every time that Bitcoin is above that bull market support band, that's when your altcoins start to surge. And so it's just really about Bitcoin being healthy. And then all the others can actually start to really pump, right? And that's when you see all those massive gains. And that's pretty much exactly this too, right? Where your Bitcoin dominance would actually go down once it gets a little more healthy, because now your altcoins can start to run a little bit. It's a little bit more risk on that everyone starts to take. So super interesting stuff, and something that I'm looking at definitely is the Bitcoin dominance. And really, when I'm looking at altcoins, I feel like a good way to look at it is comparing those to Ethereum, kind of your prime time altcoin, right? It's good to kind of compare and contrast what those look like.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Any other thoughts, Evan, Garcia?
I think you guys covered it pretty well. I mean, it's interesting to see that, only like less than a year ago, Bitcoin was at a 70-60% market dominance that has quickly shifted. So, I think you're right, Zoe, that it's playing within that bound there that you're seeing. Like it's been up and down a little bit, but it feels like there probably hasn't been a ton of resistance outside of that. When you're looking at 2 years out, 3 years out, so probably still a lot of variability there, and we'll just have to keep watching that.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if interest rates and inflation weren't in the equation. Like, I wonder how, would we just be free roaming? Like, would be back up all, new all-time high? I don't know. Because I just feel like the fundamentals have never been stronger for crypto. There's never been so much institutional money. There's never been so much adoption. There's never been so many people building on it. So fundamentally speaking, from an investment standpoint, it's technically never been stronger, but the macro conditions are just so unhealthy right now that it's like, I wonder, it'd be interesting to see if those were removed, like how successful, how healthy the market would actually be.
Definitely. And that's something I think we were talking about in our group chat too. Just the fact that you would have expected, with everything going on, right? With the talks of the rate hikes, with the talks of the macro stuff, with all the, Russia-Ukraine tension, all of that, you would have expected at this point, if we were going to see sub 30K BTC, at least in the short term, it seems like we would have seen it already. And so, it's there were a few days there was like a solid, like a good chunk of the year so far has been like Bitcoin and stocks, like basically NASDAQ, S&P, like pretty heavily correlated. But there was actually a few days there where, the stock market was pretty much dropping maybe 1-2% every day, but Bitcoin was holding up. Like it bottomed a little earlier, at least in the short term, but it was still holding up. So, if we do get a little bit of that risk on, there's definitely a lot of like hedge fund money and stuff on the sidelines right now, waiting for more clarity. But if we do get that kind of like fueling in, like driving stocks higher, we could hopefully get like another little rally here, which would be very welcomed after the last couple months.
And I don't think it's, I mean, at least from my opinion, it's a bad time to continue to, keep buying Bitcoin. It's something where we could easily see, those 7 rate hikes come down to 5, just depending on how the health of the economy is. And so, I don't know. I think it's definitely like, I'm not too worried about it dropping to, record lows. I think it's got some good consolidation going. And yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton of downside there, which I kind of feel like it feels like that would be the case with a lot of the more risky assets or tech stocks as well. But I don't know. Bitcoin, like you said, so it's really been holding up pretty nicely. It hasn't sunk too deep, but I think with a nice little S&P rally, Bitcoin starts to surge really nicely. So we'll keep watching that, but not financial advice, right, Evan?
Right.
NFA. Never financial advice. Don't listen to us. We're a bunch of degens.
Sweep wolves, buy wolves. No.
Yeah, we'll get
All
into
right.
that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of altcoins, the altcoin of the day that we're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive into, look at what's going on. Something that I think me and Armada both think is, I've always thought it was undervalued, but now I definitely do. We're gonna be talking about Fantom, FTM, today. One of my personal favorites. Anybody who's into DeFi and stuff has heard about Fantom. And Mata's got some info on it. Mata, take it away.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll go through just a really quick overview of Fantom for those that aren't as familiar with it, just some backgrounds, and then dive into some of the governance features, some of the key recent updates, why it's been hammered so hard down. We'll take a look at some of the price action, with which we'll rely a little bit on Garcia over there to go into a little bit of the TA master. And then maybe a little bit of some of the roadmap and some of the concerns we see, along with some discussion. But we'll try to be rather quick on this. I don't want to make it feel like I'm lecturing you all. So we'll give this one a shot. Let me share my screen really quick. So Fantom, right? As Sam said, one of his favorites. I know he's been working in it pretty often, so we might lean on him a little bit to give some of that perspective of like an actual user. I have not had a chance to actually go in there and work around with it, but it was founded back in 2018. It was by a South Korean computer scientist who actually stepped away in 2019, and there were no reasons given that I could find, but it's a smart contract platform. It's an L1 built by the Fantom Foundation, which is actually headed by an Australian computer scientist named Michael Kong, who's still the CEO there at Fantom Foundation. And it was really designed to overcome the limitations of old generation blockchain platforms. So wants to solve that old dilemma or trilemma of blockchains, right? Scalability, security, and decentralization, right? They always say you can't have all three. You have to sacrifice some of the pieces to continue to bolster up the rest of it. But it's famous primarily thanks to Andre Cronje. I might be mispronouncing that, so apologies. But he's a DeFi developer. He helped build Fantom and created tons of the dApps in the ecosystem, and really served as project's technical advisor until very recently, which you'll see in a second. But they raised almost 40 million across ICOs in 2019. The main net went live at the end of 2019, so fairly new. And FTM, as you can see, is the native token. It's an ERC20 token. And on here, as you can see, the market cap, as well as a max supply of about 3.175 billion, with a circulating supply of about 2.5 billion. So we're coming up on that. We're about 80% of the circulating supplies out there, which is pretty exciting, but we'll get into that in a little bit on what that could mean and have a little bit of a discussion around that as well. So just like
Just
most of
to,
these other L1s. Oh yeah, go
to
ahead.
add
Sorry.
to this, yeah, no, to add to this, one of the reasons why I think Fantom is a really interesting one is because if you look at all the other like prominent L1s, whether it's like Solana or AVAX or Terra or, you know, any of them really, they all have way higher market cap to TVL ratios. So they're basically trading at a lot higher multiple, a lot more expensive. And so on a relative basis, especially with Fantom TVL pretty much exploding over the last year, I think it's a really interesting play. It just, the one thing it doesn't have is like a huge centralized exchange presence. It's a little bit trickier to get involved with, like, get the blockchain set up and get going on it. You can't just, you know, with Avalanche or some of these other ones, Solana, you can just literally buy it on like Coinbase, transfer it over to your wallet, and you're like ready to go. Fantom, you have to jump through like a couple more hoops. And I think that's part of the reason why it hasn't, you know, done as well as some of these other ones, but definitely still opportunity there. I think just wanted to add that in, you know, when you're talking about the kind of key metrics there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And actually in December was when Binance US listed Fantom. It's still not listed on Coinbase, but Binance was the first listing on a US cryptocurrency exchange, right? And so we saw it do, you know, very well once that started to happen and once it got a little bit more limelight there. But in that same vein, right, speed kind of comes at a cost, and that's the decentralization piece, which we've talked about with a lot of these L1s that we've gone over. Fantom currently has just over 60 validators. I believe it's 65 or 66 last I checked. And it's been known that a few of them are run by the Fantom Foundation, meaning that it is relatively centralized, which that could be a reason that, you know, your Coinbase, you know, wouldn't want to actually list that. But I don't know if you all had any other thoughts on that, or Soham, if you had any thoughts on that, on why it might not be listed on a lot of these US based exchanges. But that was kind of my thought process, is that decentralization factor.
I really don't know. There's been rumors, like, I remember there's a lot of Twitter rumors and stuff back in the fall that it would be listed, and like everyone was really excited, and it just never happened. But I wasn't really following it that closely at that time in terms of the reasons why, you know, Coinbase decides to use or like to list something and they decide not to list other things. I would think it like meets the criteria. Like I'm not sure what they kind of look at there, but it seems like it's plenty big enough. And definitely like a lot of TVL, a ton of users. And so hopefully it's just a matter of time, because I think, you know, the Coinbase pump is definitely like a thing.
When you when you think about that, could it be because of maybe the regulators that would be asked to investigate on behalf of Coinbase or some of these other exchanges? Just like with that centralization that you're talking about, Mata, maybe they don't have a roadmap to decentralize it further, and that could be, you know, a major hindrance.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was my thought process, right? I mean, with 60 some validators, and I couldn't find an exact number that was being run by the Fantom Foundation.
Right.
I mean, if it's, you know, half of them are being run by the Fantom Foundation, I mean, that's pretty relatively centralized, right?
Yeah.
So I think that would be kind of a problem. But in contrast, right, Fantom really doesn't use what they call a blockchain, right? It uses a DAG or directed acyclic graphs, and I will actually put we'll put a link to that as well if we're not familiar with that. But it's secured by a novel proof of stake mechanism. It's called Lachesis. But it sets the setup really allows Fantom to process up to 20,000 transactions per second. But those are only basic transactions. So because Fantom is still leveraging the Ethereum virtual machine, or the EVM, for a lot of their smart contracts, which we've seen before in some of these other altcoins that are L1s, but those complex transactions take a bit more and are really limited to a few hundred transactions per second there. So I know that's one of the big things on their roadmap is to actually develop a Fantom virtual machine, which would be very interesting and a lot different, but they haven't actually come out with any information around what the transactions per second or the TPS there would be as well. But that is one of the things that they're working on to start to bolster that piece as they move forward. One thing that I thought was really interesting was the way they have the nodes, the validators, the delegation all set up. So validators, they have to stake a minimum of 500,000 Fantom. And they have to store all of the Fantom transaction history. So one thing that's interesting is 100% of their stake will be slashed if they try to manipulate some of these transactions. I know this is something that's a little bit different for each of the altcoins that we've gone over, at least the L1s. Some have some penalties for kind of malicious behavior, if you will. Others don't have as something that's as crazy as this, but it's 100% is actually slashed for you, which I think is generally a good thing to have penalties for, doing the wrong thing, right? Or manipulating some of these transactions in ways that isn't good for the community. So it's good to see that, honestly. But delegation is the other piece. It can easily be done using this F wallet that I have here. So you just connect your wallet. What's nice is you can connect it straight to MetaMask, some of your others, just since it's using that Ethereum piece or that EVM for its smart contracts. But just like validation, it is interesting that the delegators will have a risk of 100% slash. So as always, choose your node wisely. I think that's the big key here, right? It's like you are pretty much putting your money with one of these validators, so you just got to make sure it's the right one. Any additions to that? So I know you've been kind of in some of these pieces. I don't know if you've been in the F wallet.
No,
before,
I actually haven't been in F wallet. Most of my experience in Fantom has been on the DeFi side and like farming and stuff. But the actual validators and like how it's set up. So can you basically delegate your Fantom to one of these, like, because you have to have just a shit ton of Fantom to be a validator, right?
So a validator, it'd be 500,000 Fantom, but to delegate, all you need is one Fantom.
And you basically delegate you delegate your Fantom to one of the validators who has enough, and then
correct.
You get some sort of like yield for that.
Right. The returns really depend on how long it's locked up for. I believe there's a 7-day unlock period, regardless of how long it's locked up. But the longer you lock it up, the better return you get. I know the validators can earn like over 17% in a year, but I believe they advertise somewhere between 14 to 17 is the typical. So yeah, super awesome. But yeah, I know.
Yeah, so definitely something continue. Sorry.
No, I was going off of you. So if you had something else to add there.
No, I was just saying, so it's like, it's a possible option if you're just bullish on Fantom in general and you just don't want, like, for listeners who maybe want to invest in it or have invested in it, it's just sitting in your wallet. I didn't know this, but this is a possible avenue. Usually, like, for me, what I've been doing with my Fantom that I'm going to hold is just like farming it with USDC on some of these farming platforms and earning yield through that. Because I will be holding it for a long time, so may as well earn some yield on it. I guess this is another option, and you don't even need to pair it with anything. It seems like you can just commit your Fantom tokens straight up.
I believe that is correct
on it. That's pretty cool.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But of course, choose your node wisely. that is the key, right? Make sure you're on a good validator there. But on the DeFi side, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Zoe, but I didn't realize that there was a stable coin called FUSD that can actually be minted with both staked and unstaked Fantom as collateral. So that FUSD, it's used to invest in tons of synthetic assets, like other cryptos, like FBTC or FETH. So that was really interesting to see as well.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of those pairs. on a lot of the exchanges on Fantom. So you can basically add liquidity, like if that's the stable coin that you're holding, that's the context I've seen it in.
Hmm.
But I didn't actually know like the actual mechanics of I guess minting it. So you have to deposit either Fantom or some other asset as collateral and then borrow some of that, I guess.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting is you can actually use your stake Fantom as collateral. I feel like usually that's not the case. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, recently they've seen over 200 decentralized applications, dApps deploy on the DAG there. And so I know we've seen this before, but DeFi protocols alone currently hold over 5 billion in TVL for Fantom, which is super.
Oh, you
super
have to
incredible.
you also have to check staking over there, and you have to check pool 2 and borrows. See on the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, so check all those. That gives you like the true TVL of all the protocols. Bang.
So this is all of them, and the DeFi
Yeah.
piece is 5 billion just itself, which is super
Right.
interesting to me. And they do have an FTM scanner, is what they call it. And we can put we'll put all these links in the description as well. But there's over 2.5 million unique Fantom wallet addresses according to that scanner, which makes it one of the most adopted cryptocurrencies on the market, which was super exciting to see, honestly.
That's a crazy stat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Cool.
So I was just going back to what you were saying, Mata, where you can basically like the staked Fantom, you can deposit it as collateral. There's a few different protocols that I've worked on or like worked with that have that as an option. Usually it's known as like what's it called? Oh yeah, it's like a yield bearing asset. So sometimes protocols allow you to basically you stake whatever you're going to stake, or it's a liquidity pool token or something like that you receive in return for doing the liquidity pool or staking something, and you receive another token in like in your wallet, and it's basically like the yield bearing token. It's a token that stands for what you've deposited in there, and you can take that yield bearing token and then go to other protocols, and some of them allow you to deposit that and take out stables. So people use this almost like a triangular strategy to continue, like, sure, I'm going to stake my stuff, but I still want to borrow against it, and then invest those stables into other protocols or other projects, or whatever you want to do. Yeah, it's called like yield bearing token, a yield bearing asset.
So that is a thing, is what you're saying, is using your staked whatever native coin as collateral then?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know that
That's
you could do it with like staked Fantom, but like I have heard it, I've seen it being done on multiple DeFi protocols.
I guess for me, obviously very new to the DeFi space, not super familiar with it. It wasn't something that I had ever even thought about. So when that popped up, I was like, oh, that does sound really unique and different. But
yeah,
I
obviously,
think it's a cool option.
Anytime this is like, once you get into borrowing and using leverage, got to be really careful, because your asset goes down a certain amount and you could get liquidated, and there goes your deposit, right? So obviously, do your own research, not financial advice. Yeah.
Well, I guess moving on to the governance piece. So, besides paying for transaction fees, staking, minting with synthetic assets, it can also be used for governance, right? The FTM. But Fantom's governance can be accessed by that same wallet that we were talking about before, and one Fantom is equal to 1 vote. And you have to have 100 Fantom burned to actually table a proposal for some of the governance pieces. So what I thought was super interesting is rather than a simple yes, no, respondents actually have an option of stating how much they agree or disagree with a proposal using like a 5-point scale, which I think was a little bit different from a governance perspective, and it makes it a little bit easier too, with it being a lower amount that you have to actually burn through to put together a proposal. So I thought that was cool as well.
Do they require you to burn your Fantom to cast your vote, or is it just that you got to hold it?
I believe So that's a good question, right? Does it pool up until you get to 100 and then it's burned?
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to figure out. I can't tell if you have to put in the Fantom and burn it and then hope that
Yeah.
it gets to 100. I think if you really wanted something, you would just burn the 100 Fantom, right? Just to be safe.
Yep.
But yeah, that's something that I was trying to find. And so I'll probably do a little bit of research after this too to figure that out. Because that was a question I had too.
I came across this platform called Snapshot, and they had the same problem with the sandbox and determining the roadmap there. But yeah, they use this website that essentially just takes a snapshot of all the holders of that cryptocurrency, and instead of having to burn, the currency as a voting mechanism or a burning mechanism to vote. They're just able to take it, and so your users aren't losing value. So
no, that makes sense, and that makes me think it would be like a pool, right? Like if we all wanted to vote and say we all put like 5 Fantom and then we didn't get to 100, like not enough came in, I think we would get that back, but that's something that I have to confirm on my end.
Yeah.
Which if others are doing it, I assume that that's how Fantom's doing it as well.
Yeah, well, I think this Snapshot app or company is pretty new, so it feels like it's an area that other probably crypto or altcoin founders are looking into because I mean, when you think about it, like some of these don't have a large supply, and so when you're burning to vote, it could be significantly changing the price that it has pre and post vote. So
yeah, absolutely, and that's just for governance too.
Right.
To push forward some super key recent updates. So obviously, I know we talked about December Binance US listed Fantom, which was really big, first US cryptocurrency exchange. Back in November, Fantom lowered the requirements for projects looking to participate in its $370 million incentive program, which I actually have a piece here, I believe, on that. Might be here. Just skipping all around now. Here it is, which I thought this is an interesting little graphic of the incentive programs of the different ecosystems. Binance Smart Chain giving out billion to attract people to come and build projects. You can see Fantoms here, so fairly large. We've talked about both Avalanche and Terra as bringing in a lot based on their incentive programs, but Fantom back in November, putting the 370 million forward, right? They attracted dozens of additional projects, which previously caused a 6x increase in their TBL when they did that. So super exciting stuff then. And then most recently, I guess let's go to this piece. Most recently, Andre announced initial plans for a DeFi project called Solidly, which is on Fantom. We won't cover this today. Again, we'll link this in the description. But he was building it with another DeFi developer, and it caused Fantom to really, really pump. And actually, after this news, became the 3rd largest crypto by TVL, and even surpassed Ethereum by daily transactions. So super great stuff.
One word on this. This was crazy for a couple months there, because basically what he did was he announced it, and everyone's question was like, oh my God, like, how are we going to be able to buy this? Like, how do we get our hands on this? Is there going to be like a whitelist? Is there going to be, what is the launch going to look like, basically, right? So the way they did it was actually, what they said was the top 20 protocols on DeFi Llama by TVL on Fantom will get an allocation of tokens. And then it's up to them how they, basically distribute that to their users and their holders. So it caused this mega rush into all these Fantom protocols. And obviously, if you're a Fantom protocol, if you're one of the people, even in like the top 30, you want to get your hands on some of these tokens because it's obviously a very big project. So a ton of DeFi protocols were offering like crazy high yields because they wanted to increase their TVLs. So almost everything on the Fantom network was absolutely ripping during like about a month. It was in the winter time. Really crazy though. So that gives a little bit of context.
That was
The actual
pumping
protocol,
P.
yeah, the actual protocol. I mean, we can cover this later or something, but it's a very
It's super
interesting
similar to
protocol.
Uniswap. This
Yeah,
solidly
it
based.
has
Yeah.
right. So it's Uniswap, but they also have these if you guys have heard of Curve, Curve is I think a project that we talked about the main protocol period to swap stable coins, right? And the way that is set up is, if you lock your tokens, you get a vote. And then with that vote, you can then vote on which pools to give the most yield to. So it's a really long story. And like, I'm happy to cover this in another episode. Is like called the Curve Wars, where basically protocols, obviously like huge investors would want their pools to have the highest APY, right? And so they would go on binge buying sprees to get as much curve as possible to then lock it up so they have the most votes so that they can then influence where the yield is going. So it's like this kind of flywheel effect that made them an extremely successful protocol. And that similar concept was used here. So it's almost like a Uniswap fork along with, you'll see this VE NFT. It's the same. They're trying to develop that same concept of like locking up a certain amount of tokens or the NFT, for example, and then using that to influence where, yield goes. Does that make sense? It's a little bit complicated, but that's what kind of they were going for.
Yeah, and so I know I did see that it was mentioned that this was inspired allegedly by Olympus DAO. Remind me, you were involved. You were involved in that. We talked about that, right? Olympus.
Yeah. Is that I wonder what part of it is inspired by Olympus DAO.
Yeah.
Olympus DAO was doing a lot of like really interesting things, / they still are. I'm wondering which part of it theoretically was.
That'd be interesting to kind of compare and contrast. But
yeah, I think you're right though. I think you're right because there was the Olympus DAO, they started this 3-3 meme, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the 3,3. It's basically like this game theory concept that Olympus DAO was based on, that if everyone just holds, it's the best outcome for everyone, right? If nobody sells, then the token price continues to go up and like everyone earns their yield and like happy life. Obviously that didn't happen. I showed you guys the chart. Clearly that didn't
rug
happen.
of the week.
So there are concepts of this within Solidly. I don't know the exact details of it, but they took concepts from there and they took concepts from Curve, which I'm familiar with, and they kind of combined them together. But yeah, I can link a few things as well, which are good reads on this project. But
that'd be awesome.
I mean, we're talking rug of the week because our boy Andre, what happened to him?
Yeah, seriously, I think that's the next piece, right? So recently, very, very recently, to pile on top of how tough it has been for the markets in general, and obviously specifically altcoins, right? Here in March, in Twitter, it's completely out of the blue. Anton Nell, who's a senior solutions architect at the foundation, also a close friend of Andre, announced that they would both be leaving the crypto space, just completely leaving. And so what's interesting and something to note, right? Andre has left the crypto space twice before, once at the start of 2020 and then near the end of 2020. Most of that, he was working almost exclusively on Ethereum. Another piece that they did mention in here was that they'd be terminating 25 Dapster services at the beginning of April, and which that really caused all of crypto associated to crash, including Fantom. But it has been kind of stated since then that he did not mean that the dApps themselves would be decommissioned or deprecated or anything like that, but rather the front ends that they owned and operated would be shut down. So by this point, most of those had become relatively independent of their creators and initial contributors anyways. But what was really the tough part, I think, is from the outside looking in, like this announcement looked a lot like insiders finding the top, selling it, and bailing, right? Kind of like a rug style, right? So it felt really, really bad to have this happen. So a lot of bad news, a lot of FUD came out on top of how bad the market was doing. But then there was a statement from the Fantom Foundation. They did end up addressing a lot of the misconceptions. This was from March 11th. It looks like this post was from March 6th. So less than a week later after they got hit pretty hard. But they had specified in here that Andre was an advisor, really nothing more as far as the core project goes. They addressed all the FUD about the 25 projects being terminated. And they really harped on the fact that they have 40 plus developers working on Fantom. Michael Kong, who's their CEO, is a specialist with EVM and really working with academics to start to improve that and continue to bolster a lot of the fundamentals behind the Fantom Foundation and Fantom in general. So that was interesting. I guess the real question is, why did they and why did Andre leave? A lot of the news seems to be stress, right? And being a top personality in the crypto space, I'm sure has to take a pretty big toll on the mental health. I'm sure he's received physical threats, right? I feel like that happens in the space often. So I can kind of understand that. But what doesn't quite make sense is he had a lot of plans for decentralized applications and was super excited to develop them. So it's like, I feel like it was likely something super sudden or extremely stressful that would have caused him to exit. But I don't know if you all have thoughts on what would cause someone that's so bullish in the space and so involved to do something like that.
So I have a little bit more context, and it's definitely important context. I think this played a huge role in it. So if you guys remember Time Wonderland, right? The classic.
How can we forget? How
So
can we forget?
I don't remember exactly if Andre worked. No, I don't think he worked on Time Wonderland, but he was working with the head of Time Wonderland, Danny, on this Solidly project. And all of the shit that went down with Time Wonderland and all of that, and their fucking head of their treasury being a felon and all of that stuff went down pretty much in sync with I don't want to say it was exactly in sync with the launch of Solidly, but it was during the same time. It was during the same time period. It was the same couple of months where all this, maybe pretty much back to back, where all this was coming out. And so I think that, Andre, he's been a brilliant member of the DeFi community. Some of these protocols, when you talk about 25 different protocols, like Yearn and Keeper, and some of these protocols, they're cornerstones of DeFi, right? Just really, really interesting projects. Same thing with Solidly, but he's always kind of been behind the scenes. It seems like he hasn't really been a huge public figure. Meanwhile, Danny from Time Wonderland, I think the plan there, I'm just completely speculating, but I think the plan there was to have Danny being the front face of the whole thing, because he was so good at marketing and memeing and all of that stuff, all the stuff that was going on with Time Wonderland, right? Why it exploded. It's because he was just he's a meme king. He's a walking meme, literally. And so I think that was kind of the plan. And when that sort of terrible, it's not even allegations, it was just proven to be true. When all that goes down with a person that you're working with so closely with, I can't definitively say that impacted this entire situation, but I really do think it did.
So Danny was the Solidly guy that we were talking about then. He was the counterpart to this piece. Is that what you were saying? The Solidly project?
I believe that they were working together on it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think that definitely impacted it at least a little bit. Definitely can't ignore it.
Yeah, the only other thought I had would be the regulations piece, right? You have this super rogue in the cut DeFi developer that they can't control. Like, what are they going to do from a regulation standpoint? And he just kind of wanted to get away from that, or got some sort of a threat in that setting. But again, right, this isn't his first time leaving. Like, and the Fantom Foundation basically was like, yeah, he was just kind of an advisor. So the fundamentals here still extremely strong. Just a lot of bad news for them, on top of a bad market, which is really beating them down. But I think that gets us to a good point to talk about kind of the price action. And as we can see, right, was 330 at its top about. Now we're looking at what? 126.
126.
So I mean,
yeah.
you're like down almost 3x, right? It feels like you had a little bit of a double top going on. But again, fundamentals still extremely strong. All the Fantom that was allocated to the team and the early investors finished vesting in late 2020, which is super good. I know we talked about Avalanche and they still have these vesting periods and pieces like that, right? So that does eliminate some of that price suppression that you often see when some of these pieces get unlocked, which is good news. Again, over 2.5 million unique wallet addresses doesn't seem to be slowing down. Number of daily transactions did take a nosedive, but still in a strong uptrend. TVL, same story, still in a long-term uptrend, but did take a nice little nosedive there. Could be listing on other US exchanges soon. I'm thinking Coinbase will probably hop on. They probably just need a little bit more clarity around the decentralized piece. I think there's a lot of good reasons to think that we probably hit a low with Fantom around that 108, 104 area that it was sitting at. But again, I think just like we were talking about at the beginning, it kind of depends on what that dominance for Bitcoin looks like. And if we can kind of get above and get a healthy Bitcoin, then this can start to surge as well. But just like we were talking about earlier, I don't see a ton of downside here, not financial advice. I love it. I think it's gotten unnecessarily hammered down lately on top of all the market news. But what are your guys' thoughts?
I completely agree with everything you said. Nothing has changed, I think, I mean, you mentioned 40 plus developers working on Fantom itself, but that doesn't even count God knows how many developers working on all the protocols and stuff that, they're still there. This isn't
one
like a
thing
one-man show.
Exactly, right? And only one person, or well, two people, I guess, left. But one thing that was really interesting. So as you can see, circulating supply, 80%. The last Fantom is supposed to be minted at the end of September of 2023. And we're talking like, what, a year and a half from now at that point? So like, I think that's one part is like, what does the sustainability of Fantom look like? That was kind of one of my concerns. Like, this is something that they're super hyper aware of, which is good. They've talked about it in their AMAs and such. But if it runs out of staking rewards to incentivize validators, like what does this look like and what are the solutions? I mean, I can think of like two, right? One would be removing that max supply, which none of us want to hear, right? So that's like something that we always look at. And then increasing what the transaction fees look like. And that's the reason this chain has kind of come about, is to negate some of those fees and be different. So both of those can hurt the price. So I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts, or what could be some actual valid solutions there that would keep Fantom sustainable over the long term, even though that max supply kind of gets reached pretty quickly there?
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully
the foundation has a good roadmap going forward here. And even though that they've got some significant players leaving, they can continue the growth, and it sounds like it's got a strong developer platform. So I feel like that's a sticky community that once it's hooked into, a good platform where they can build off of, and they see, the users don't even necessarily have to be there in the beginning, but as long as they're getting the support, and the roadmap updates from that foundation, you could see this being sustainable for a while.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
definitely
look at
gonna have
this
to.
ecosystem.
Yeah,
Right,
they're,
right.
they're definitely gonna need to actually have like users and like additional dApps that actually come on board for them to be sustainable long term, because you can't necessarily like switch up the like underlying structure of the ecosystem at this point. Like they're gonna have to eventually stop rewarding validators, so the kind of upside is gonna have to come from appreciation of the token and like of the ecosystem itself. So I feel like it's gonna, it's hard to like change it now, but I feel like it kind of how what Evan said, if the dApps become successful, if the ecosystem becomes successful, then that's going to translate in price.
Right.
Again, super bullish on Fantom. I think it's at a good, not financial advice, it's at a good spot right now. I don't think that I don't think it has a ton of downside. But we'll see where it goes from here. I think it's been really beaten, but it's still extremely, extremely solid. It has great potential, great headwinds. The really big question is, can they overcome some of these concerns, right? The sustainability, the two of those prolific personalities leading the ecosystem. And then the only other really thing that I noticed was like kind of the transparency piece. We don't know what wallet the Fantom Foundation owns and operates, or what it's doing with that Fantom. Again, that's something that can be super easily addressed. But like Evan said, if they meet their milestones, they could easily become a top 10 crypto and start to really take off in the space. So I think it's been a little bit of an unnecessary beatdown. So I'll probably be looking to enter a position here with Fantom sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely seems oversold. Might be an opportunity to start dollar cost averaging in, just take the, macro risk out of play. But yeah, no, I thought that was a great overview and deep dive into Fantom in the current situation. I would completely agree. I'm just as bullish as I was before. It's also the cheapest, as I mentioned, the cheapest like L1 you can really get right now. I just think give it some time. We got to give it some time, and it's a good time to start looking at it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you were bullish
right.
on it back when it was way above what it is now too. And so to have you say that too kind of goes to show that I really should be DCAing in. Not financial advice.
Yeah, I mean, if the fundamentals don't change, like every dip should be an accumulation period for you. If you're in it long term and the fund, obviously if like it's a complete rug, then you just get out. But like if the fundamentals haven't changed, like it should be accumulation every dip.
Right.
And it's
sweet.
It sounds like they could provide a little more transparency into who's running the project. I mean, if Twitter is really reacting that much to, pseudo consultants or advisors of the projects, there's probably
Seriously.
something wrong with the amount of transparency that's coming from the top down. So
Exactly.
I think that's, a bullish case for this is, like you're saying, Sia, like developers stay sticky, the ecosystem stays healthy, but maybe the people running the actual projects, provide a little transparency, and that'll help grow it into, like you said, Mata, top 10.
I think that's fair. I will say, like, losing Andre is definitely like a hit. I'm not gonna say that it's not a hit, because he was just involved in like so many solid projects. But I mean, I maintain it's not like a 1-man or 2-man team. Like, just one person leaving shouldn't send it down 50%. I think that's just a complete overreaction, because there's still, like you guys were saying, so many opportunities, so many good developers, so many good projects, and still some of the highest yields in DeFi. Like, that hasn't changed at all. So
yeah, nothing's really changed besides that he left, right? Which, to be fair, it did bring a lot of publicity to them, but that's not ultimately what people are looking at, right? So
right. It'll be back. It'll be back and stronger. That is for sure. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. episode 3 in the books. Thank you all. Thank you all listeners for joining us. We will be back again, same time, same place next week. Make sure to tune in. If you found any of this useful, please like, subscribe, and comment. Yeah, and we will see you next time. Signing off.
Peace.
Later.